Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for, I want to start by saying thank you very much for inviting me. Hold on, get my, there. Thank you very much for inviting me. And so thank you very much also to SAMSA for putting this event on. It's very important, and judging by the number of people here in the room today, it's a very popular event and something that's very timely. Also, it's an honor to be here with you, Deputy Minister, and thank you so much for the important note and speech you made earlier. I really appreciate it. I can start just by briefly introducing myself. My name is Lena Dyring. On a day-to-day basis, I work for the Norwegian Seafarers Union, where I work a lot with collective bargaining agreements for seafarers in the cruise industry. So a lot of women seafarers, of course. I worked a lot of, I had a lot of our equality and gender equality projects that we run. And then I'm also fortunate enough to be the women's representative on the ITF Seafarers section. Anyway, I want to say, obviously this has been touched upon already, but just want to touch briefly upon what gender-based violence is and what it looks like at sea. The term violence and harassment in the world of work, of course, refers to a range of unacceptable behaviors and practices or threats thereof, whether a single occurrence or repeated, that aim at, result in, or are likely to result in physical, physiological, sexual, or economic harm, and includes gender-based violence and harassment. Now, obviously, I did not come up with these words myself. This is the Article 1 of the ILO Convention 190, which South Africa has been a trailblazer in ratifying. So I also really want to congratulate you on that. My country is trailing. They're finally waking up to walking down the same path, which I'm very happy about, but congratulations for being at the forefront there. So this definition by the International Labour Organization sees violence and harassment as a range of unacceptable behaviors, of course, so that harassment is not dismissed and or normalized. And harassment, of course, causes trauma for survivors, and it can also often lead to other forms of violence. Harassment and bullying on board ships can have serious consequences, of course, as we've heard witness statements of already, for the physical and emotional health of seafarers. It can lead to decreased motivation, increased sickness, and can compromise cohesive and effective teamwork. It can also have negative effects for companies, resulting in deterioration of working conditions and potential organizational and economic and legal consequences. Again, these are not words I came up with myself. This is from the ITF guidance on eliminating bullying and harassment at sea. So yeah. So what are the benefits there of which of course this guidance is part of now, and part of the MLC as well. So the benefits then, of course, of C190 and the MLC is that the member states of the ILO and workers and employers organizations have sent a clear message. Violence and harassment in the world of work can't be tolerated, and special attention has to be paid to gender-based violence and harassment. For just on a practical level, for women and men, very important to remember, working at sea, this has secured that anti-harassment policies must be in place, and that workers must have a right to speak up without being victimized. Again, we just heard testimony that fear of being victimized for speaking up is very real. At sea, of course, we already have this mentioned ITF guidance, which is in part of the MLC, but there's still a lot of work to do to ensure that it is in fact implemented on the ground or on the sea, if you will. So this is, I guess, the work we have ahead of us in this community. If someone can help me switch to the next slide. There we go. So this is Susanne Mortensen. She used to work in the fisheries in Norway. In this picture, she's 24 years old, so a young woman. She used to work in the fisheries in Norway, and I can also start off by saying, just as a background, fisheries in Norway is the second, in terms of revenue, is the second largest industry behind oil and gas. So it's a huge industry in the country. I can start off by saying, unfortunately, she does not work in the industry anymore, and I'll explain why. In a little bit. In Norway, of course, we pride ourselves on being, very forward in terms of equality, and that we have very robust legislation for workers, all workers. Susanne here, on the other hand, she reported that this, legislation and this mindset is not always what is happening on the ground or at sea. She reported, about a year ago, she wrote an op-ed to the largest Norwegian broadcaster, and she reported how she and her female colleagues were treated on board. I'm not going to repeat the words that were used against her and her colleagues, but they were alluding to, sex work, and also there was physical touching and a very hostile work environment. And she reported this and wrote this in this op-ed. And I think also this is a result of what was mentioned earlier, that this industry is very much out of sight, out of mind. So despite this being the second largest industry in Norway, these vessels are out there far away, oftentimes far north, close to the North Pole. There's often no internet access. It's a very insulated community, and you are not necessarily protected by the legislation that is out there. So this again proves that this legislation does not mean much without meaningful implementation. I can say that some positive things did come out of her reporting, or a lot of positive things actually came out of her reporting. It started a snowball reaction in the country. It started first, as mentioned here, started in the fisheries, where we now, as a result of her reporting and op-ed, now we have very functional tripartite collaboration to improve the working conditions for women in particular, and it then spilled over to the general maritime industry. And a large push is now being made by the government, of course in collaboration with unions and employers, to make sure that serious and very specific measures are put in place to, first of all, to attract women to want to work at sea, but also even more importantly, to make sure that they want to stay working at sea. So we look forward to this, this very specific program coming out, and promise that it's going to be translated to English as well. So we hope that this will be something useful that can be used in the maritime community. But again, it means nothing if it's not implemented, of course. So that is incumbent on all of us in the industry to do. A recent study that was part of this project, it shows that greater diversity and gender balance, it makes the industry more attractive, not only for women, it makes the industry more attractive to work in for men too, and for boys. They see it as a more friendly working environment. So it's not only for women, this is for everyone, to ensure that seafaring is attractive for everyone. So, greater gender diversity also makes women in particular less vulnerable. Research shows, and this was also already mentioned, that workers who, amongst other things, they work alone, they work in situations where there are unclear boundaries between work and personal life, and workers who are in a minority, they're particularly at risk for being harassed, sexually harassed, or a victim of physical violence. This shows that there is power in numbers, so one of the most effective ways to prevent this kind of violence then is to have a greater percentage of women seafarers. Right now, the BIMCO statistics that were already referred to, they put the number of women seafarers somewhere around 1 to 2%, which is very low. Although, of course, there's some increase, but it's still very low. It is higher in the cruise and passenger industry, where about 20 to 25%. Of course, many of these women work in hotel and catering roles, which they're also seafarers, just to make that very clear. Thank you. So with these numbers, we're missing out on nearly 50% of the potential global workforce by not making the industry attractive enough for women. Again, also for men. So this is the next slide here. Where do we want to be? Somewhere like this, I guess. We want the industry to be a place where women naturally see themselves working. It's not going to be, oh, you're going to work at sea? Are you sure you want to do that? It's going to be, yes, of course you're going to work at sea. So this picture, of course, is a little misleading. It's important to include women from all over the world, and women and men, of course, not only all women. It's important to include women from all over the world and also in all ranks. We're not going to get to a meaningful number of women if we ignore trying to recruit them to ratings roles. I think it's also important to keep in mind. So the next slide, please. So there is, I guess, what do we have to do to get there? So the first one is, of course, get them while they're young. Many different actions have to be taken. I think one of the ones, and that's also in my country, one of the things that we're really focusing on is that we try to start to attract women, girls, and then to want to work at sea when they're young. We need to start interacting with them when they're in their teenage years. That's when the conversation needs to start. And this is when decisions are made about education, about future career opportunities. And also, of course, maritime education institutions and employers and unions should reach out to high schools and maybe even younger, to middle schools. My union, just to give you an example, we regularly visit schools and high schools to talk to the students there, and it's proven very successful. We see the interest from our point of view in union membership being it increases a lot after these educational visits. So of course, and I'm sure employers do as well, but it's important to be strategic about it. Next one I suggest, and this is not an exclusive list, by the way, there are several other things, obviously. But other one is very, very important is to have zero tolerance policies for workplace interaction that are actually enforced. It's very nice. I've seen so many nice policies out there. They look great. And it's like, wow, they're really focused on no tolerance for harassment and whatnot. However, if it's not properly enforced, it again does not work. So there should be repercussions, reactions. If management who are in charge of these policies, if they do not follow up, there should be some results. There should be repercussions for that. For not following the policies. It's also important to remember to think, we get no reports of anything negative happening, and we think that this is a great thing. Again, no, it's not necessarily a great thing. No reports of anything negative happening could also very well be a result of people not daring to speak up. It could be, despite this policy that's in place, I don't want to speak up because I've seen other people being victimized for doing so. So that we have to create a culture of openness and it being okay to speak up. And I think also effective training of seafarers, very, very important. Of all seafarers need to be trained on how, and then also in all ranks, and how we can live and work on board without harassment, sexual harassment, bullying, and how they can be part of the solution. When they see something unacceptable happen, it may not rise to a very serious offense, but it could be something where you feel this is not okay. How can I then step in before it becomes a big thing? How can I step in and make this situation better? There's something called Don't Be a Bystander training program they implemented in Canada. They trained about 6,000 working in the ports in Western Canada, 6,000 dock workers, of course, mostly men. And they trained everyone in this program. And the program is, they basically teach you little things you can do to diffuse a difficult situation without making yourself vulnerable. So it could be, if someone tells an offensive joke, what is the best thing you can do there in order to stop that situation? Well, the best thing you can do is just don't laugh, you know? It doesn't make you vulnerable, but it also tells the person telling the joke that this is not okay. It could be if you see some interaction between two other people that is not okay, you can walk in there, again, diffuse the situation, and start talking about the weather or whatnot, just to make it easier for whoever is in that situation. And so on. And there are countless examples of how this program has worked and that it's had a very, very positive reception. But again, it's important to train everyone, and I think there it was very positive because men took charge and sort of were role models for how they wanted that, and it made the working environment very a lot better for everyone. Another thing, of course, it seems maybe very obvious, is to get a minimum percentage of women seafarers. One thing that's very easy then is employers could say, well, I want to hire X amount of women seafarers. And that could be a metric where management is measured on. If you don't reach this percentage that you've decided upon, they should be said, well, you weren't successful, so your bonus payment this year is going to be affected by that. This just create a business case, if you will, as to why more women should be hired. And of course, this needs to come from all the way at the top in these companies. But that's also proving very effective. And then you could say again to the next one, to maritime training institutions, you could say, well, we're not getting all the women that we have decided we want to hire, so you need to educate more women, please, because we need them. And that power is very much in the hands of employers. So that could also be very successful. There could be reskilling or upskilling programs in place. As I mentioned, a lot of women in passenger and cruise vessels, they're working already at sea in hotel catering roles. Maybe they want to pivot their career and work in more traditional technical roles. Companies can make that happen by making programs to ensure that they get the necessary certificates, they get the necessary sea time, and all that to pivot their careers. These women already work at sea, they love it, they want to stay there. Let's help them do so. Of course, there's inclusive language and visual representation of women, very important. Also, safety equipment, it sounds so obvious. Oftentimes, there's safety equipment not in women's sizes, There's rubber boots in size 43, or there's, survival suits that are way too big, and it's a safety issue. But it also tells women that you're not really supposed to be here when it's not available. So it has to be there. And then I think also, finally, employers and unions, they have to come together to create career paths for men and women, where it's more attractive to combine having a family. Maybe make it better so you can stay in the industry. Maybe you can stay home for a few years while the kids are small, Again, men and women. And then make it easier for you to get back to work at sea when the kids are a little older. Make it a little more flexible for people. Makes it an industry that it's attractive to stay in. Yeah. In conclusion, that's my last slide. I don't remember what I put on that last slide. There we go. Thank you again for including me today. I think that it's one of the main keys to make sure that harassment, bullying, sexual harassment, and violence doesn't happen at sea is prevention. It's so much easier to handle it before it happens rather than after the fact. Because after the fact, it's already too late, and it's difficult to handle. So the only way we can get there is, of course, about working together, all of us. We need to have the patience to let it takes to fix it. It is definitely not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to be a strategic effort with little things happening in many places over time. And we need to have the patience to hang in there to let that process happen. Of course, again, finally, the industry desperately needs more seafarers in all roles. right now. And as mentioned earlier, we need to do everything we can to keep the seafarers who are already there to make sure they want to stay, and also women and men, and we need to attract new groups to come to work at sea. And I think women are a great asset to the industry and of course should be treated as such. Thank you.